Hi, and welcome to another episode of Living Room Wisdom, where your story is your glory. I'm really excited to jump into a conversation today. We're going to be speaking about 5 reasons why women settle. And this is a really juicy conversation. I honestly feel like it's a core wound for most women in one way or another. So let's go ahead and dive right in. The first reason that women settle is because of social programming. From the time that we are little girls, we're told messaging, be seen, not heard. Good girls don't do this. Good girls don't do that. And we're taught to live in the binary, right? You're either a good girl or you're a slut. You're either smart or you're dumb, right? You're either pretty or you're ugly. There's literally no space in between for us to just discover who we are and live as who we are and build that confidence and esteem that we need in order to thrive as a very authentic and unapologetic and liberated woman. And so I really believe that that's the first thing. And I don't believe that our communities, our families mean any harm through this messaging when we're little, but it's something that gets into our subconscious. And we're very young. We're being shaped. Our personalities are being shaped. Our minds are being shaped. And so at a very young age, we start to adapt and take on as truth other people's expectations, other people's opinions, other people's views of who we are, instead of having the opportunity, the space to discover who we are. So there's a lot of unraveling of old messaging, old beliefs, old stories, and old habits that we learn as a very young girl that then follow us throughout our lives. And it's the foundation for which we start to make decisions and build our life around. And so today, I want to really encourage you to get clear about some of the messaging that you adapted as a child and start to separate what's true about you, what you know to be true about you, from the stories that you've been told. All right, so that's number one, social programming. So now let's talk about the second reason that women settle. The second reason is fear of judgment or abandonment. No matter how good your childhood was, all of us have had experiences where we feared losing love, where we may have feared being too much or not enough for someone that we really were seeking validation and acceptance from. That's a core wound that we've all experienced at one time or another, but it's something that we need to be aware of, be made aware of, and address and begin to heal so that we can be more intentional about how we want to show up. Some of the things that happen when you are stuck in the cycle of being fearful of judgment is you shrink yourself, right? You dumb yourself down in certain rooms as not to be too much, or you don't use your voice and speak your mind and uphold boundaries because you're afraid of losing love if you come up against or challenge somebody else's opinion or their expectation of you, right? So those are a couple ways that that shows up. And what happens when you're afraid to lose love or be too much or be not enough is, again, you start to shape shift yourself to fit into someone else's box. And then eventually you create a prison that you can't get out of, whether that's a narcissistic relationship. That could be a career that you're staying in because that's what's expected of you, but it's not fulfilling you. It's actually killing your soul, right? That could be that you become a prisoner of your own self because you're so afraid of losing others' love. That two ways that that can go. One, you become obsessed, overly obsessed with your self-image. You potentially have an eating disorder, or go the other way and just get out of control with your weight gain and your health, not taking care of your health. There's also this trend of going into plastic surgery and fixing everything that you feel might might not be acceptable to other people, right? And one day waking up and realizing that's not even what you want and that you've completely lost the essence of who you are. So there's so many different examples how other people's judgments and the fear of judgment and how that's projected onto you can start to affect you and your life choices. And so that's step two: fear of judgment, fear of abandonment, not being enough, being too much, right? Or losing love in one way or another. Now let's talk about the third reason that women settle. The third reason is emotional exhaustion, right? There are so many times I know in my life where I've said yes when I've meant no. And I haven't done this probably 99% of the time, because there's always that one time where you're like, yes, and then you're like, fuck, I should have said no. Emotional exhaustion is something that builds over time, right? Even if you know inside what your truth is, what you want, what you don't want, um, you don't always have the energy because we're managing so many different things: our careers, our children, our partners, our friendships, right? There's just so many things that we're juggling on a daily basis, that invisible workload that we as women carry that isn't often acknowledged, validated, or spoken to. But because we're managing all of these things, and making all of these decisions and carrying so many people's emotions on a daily basis, then that emotional exhaustion starts to build. And what happens when that emotional exhaustion starts to build is that our capacity for standing up for ourselves and upholding boundaries, honoring our yes instead, our honoring our yes and our no, right? It starts to deteriorate because it becomes easier to get along. And so I feel like emotional exhaustion is one of the most dangerous of the reasons why we settle, because we just don't feel like we have the capacity. And honestly, the way to remedy that is to take up more space, to speak your mind more, to honor your no and honor your yes, right? So many times with women, we're going to say, when we say no, it's going to be no, right? And we want to give a complete explanation for why we're saying that no. That goes back to the fear of judgment and the potential loss of love and the fear of abandonment. If you're going to say no to something, if your body, your mind, your spirit, your capacity is telling you to say no, honor the no. No is a complete sentence. All right, so let's talk about the fourth reason why women settle. The fourth reason is lack of support. If we don't have examples of women that are standing up for themselves, speaking their minds, banding together to liberate themselves and their authentic selves, and being able to live in that space, especially in our most intermediate surroundings and environments, so within our families, within our neighborhoods, then it feels unsafe. And I want to say that probably the top two things that women seek in general are feelings of safety. We want to not only feel seen and heard and validated, but we want to know that we can speak our minds and show up in our truth without being attacked. And honestly, that has not been most of our experience since we were very young. And so what happens is that we silence ourselves. We actually forget that we have options because we have solidified and adopted the belief that we are unworthy. So the last reason why women settle is unworthiness. We're caught up in a trauma loop that was really ingrained in us at a very young age, once again, that tells us that we're not worthy of more. And so then that becomes this barrier. And it's a barrier because we really believe it here. And a lot of times it's something that we're not even aware that we're a belief that we're not aware we're functioning within. See, deep down, many women don't feel worthy of more, right? More joy, wealth, more peace, more pleasure. So we settle because we don't feel, not only do we not feel worthy, but we also feel like lucky to have what we already have or anything at all. And that's just crazy. It's absolutely insane. We have to learn how to honor ourselves in order for other people to honor us. So, where do we commonly settle? Let's go a little bit deeper into that. We definitely settle in the area of relationships, whether it be romantic, platonic, familial. We end up overgiving, tolerating poor communication. We shrink to avoid conflict. We stay together way longer than we should. I know so many people that are dealing with narcissistic partners and they're just frightened. They've been beat down so much that they're a shell of themselves and they just don't see a way out. Why? Because we're loyal. Women are naturally loyal. We're committed. We're nurturers, right? But mostly because we fear loneliness. We are not used to being with ourselves. We're hiding behind other people and we're creating codependency in our relationships in order to feel safe, like we talked about earlier. So now let's talk about business and career, right? And settling. Why do we settle and how do we settle in business and career? That shows up typically as us undercharging for the value of our work, overworking, becoming workaholics, and I've definitely been guilty of that. We get caught in a loop of perfectionism, which is also our unworthiness showing up. We silence our voices in the boardroom and in the bedroom, and we stay in jobs, relationships, client relationships that beat us down, make us feel unworthy, more unworthy, right? And so, why do we choose this security over sovereignty, or actually, I'll say perceived security over sovereignty? I think honestly, it's just that we haven't been shown another way, right? We're not doing the personal development, the transformation, and the healing work that's necessary to break through some of those patterns. So we just continue in lives and roles that are not aligned with our soul's assignment. So take a pause. I talk a lot about taking a pause to really listen to what your soul is crying out for. All right. So, another way that our unworthiness and our settling shows up is in our money, right? We settle for just enough, not too much, not too little, but just enough. We carry money shame. We avoid money conversations and we operate in a system of survival that we don't even know we're operating in, right? Rather than embracing and living in a place of expansion, elevation, and abundance. And that's what I talk about in the Anatomy of Abundance book is what does it look like to make decisions and to be functioning from a place of scarcity versus abundance. And the Anatomy of Abundance framework actually walks you through how to break some of those cycles. All right. So we often disconnect from our divinity and our energy from the finances and the avoidance of dealing with those finances or breaking through the financial trauma loops that we have. And definitely that is what I'm here for. I'm here to support, bring awareness, and give tools to help you to start reclaiming your life, reclaiming your essence, reclaiming your joy, your fulfillment, and really step into your purpose. Some of the other ways that women's settling shows up is in our self care and our wellness. We glorify being busy. We don't rest enough. And rest is when the regeneration actually happens, not only in our cells, but in our minds and in our emotions. Proper rest is a reset that's needed by all of us, but we don't give ourselves permission to do so. We say yes to others and abandon ourselves, and that becomes a habit. Anything that you do often becomes a habit, and it becomes an unconscious habit that then becomes hard to break. And then let's talk about the last thing, right? How is settling deteriorating your self image, your self esteem, your self worth, but also limiting your life and that's purpose and creativity. So, we as women have a tendency to ignore or discount our true passions. We dim our light, we dim our magic. We don't want to take up too much space or be too fucking fabulous because then that's, challenging someone else's self image, right? Or making us unacceptable to society. We wait for permission to pursue our visions, our goals, our dreams. And there is no permission. We are the ones who give ourselves permission in anything, right? We get to make those choices. I believe we all have so many more options available to us than we give ourselves permission to acknowledge, let alone take. So with that, we end up calling our dreams silly, they're unrealistic, and we have people around us who essentially they reinforce those negative disempowering beliefs that we already have, and then it slowly begins to kill our spirit. So we don't have to continue living in this way, functioning in this way. And that's why I'm inviting women, I'm inviting you potentially to share your story in my Anatomy of Abundance, Volume 2, The Evolution of Women Who Refuse to Settle. These are stories that need to be told, that they're journeys that other women must be inspired by. The book will provide the framework or the guide for breaking through those patterns of settling. And again, I'm inviting you in. If you're interested in being a part of this book or having a conversation about how you might be a part of this book, you don't have to be a writer. You just have to have a story, right? One that you're willing to share vulnerably in a very raw way for the greater good of humanity and us as women. And so, if that's something you're interested in, definitely look in the show notes and apply. But with that, I want to go ahead and close out this episode with just a little recap of the 5 reasons or the 5 ways that we as women settle. And again, the first one is social programming. The second is fear of judgment. The third was emotional exhaustion. The fourth was lack of support. And the fifth reason was of the unworthiness and the trauma loops that we find ourselves in. So if you're someone who resonated with any of those 5 things that we talked about today, I'm here to support you. I see you, I hear you, I feel you, I've been you. And at times, I still am. So, this is why I created the Anatomy of Abundance framework. That's why we have the Anatomy of Abundance books. We have a private podcast that you can be a part of where you get more personal touch and direct communications around some of the things you might be experiencing and other offerings. So, support is available if you're ready. If you step into a container that feels safe and sovereign, if you're ready to be supported by women who have been where you are, who have overcome all sorts of adversity to live their life of unapologetic liberation and acceptance. So I'm inviting you into the bubble of living room wisdom where your story is your glory. And if nothing else, I'll see you next week right here, same time, same channel. Go ahead and like us on Instagram, Patrina Wisdom and Living Room Wisdom. And I look forward to engaging in this conversation again soon. Bye.